Hi everyone, and thank you for attending our webinar series on COVID-19 vaccination in Southeast Asia. Today we will discuss COVID-19 vaccination in Cambodia. My name is Marion Carles and I'm a senior legal advisor and head of DFDL's employment practice group, and I will have the pleasure to host our webinar series. So for those who are not familiar with DFDL, we are a law firm based in Southeast Asia and we specialize in emerging markets. We are present in 9 countries and employ over 150 advisors and more than 300 staff. We have a team dedicated to labor and employment across our various offices to ensure that our clients receive constant, seamless, and appropriate legal assistance when employment issues arise. In this webinar, we will provide lawful consideration for employers on COVID-19 vaccinations in Cambodia. With such a large audience attending our webinar today, we will do our best to answer your queries during this webinar and especially at the end of this webinar. If we don't have the chance to address your questions, I encourage you to follow up by email. You can find our email contacts on our website or at the end of the webinar. You will have our email address outlined. Joining us on the program today is Raksa Chan. She's a senior consultant at DFDL Cambodia. Welcome to the program, Raksa. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Marion, and thank you for inviting me to this live webinar. It's very interesting, and I hope that our attendees will also enjoy it as well.
Thank you very much, Raksa. So now I suggest we kick off, and actually my first question, Raksa, will be very general, but if you could provide us a little bit of update and background as to the current situation in Cambodia right now regarding COVID-19, and also confirms that the vaccination campaign has already started in Cambodia.
Well, thank you, Marion. So I think you may have already heard that in Cambodia there's a community outbreak of the COVID-19 since this February. So we can see that the number of the infected cases has been increased sharply, and the Ministry of Health and the government also updates the cases on a daily basis as well. Up until May, the 3rd of May, we can see that there are around 16,000 plus of infected cases, and the number also keep increasing. And for the vaccination campaign, actually, after the community outbreak, the Ministry of Health also launched a public vaccination campaign in late March 2021 in order to tackle and to curb the spread of the COVID-19. Along with that, you can see the government also made a lot of effort in issuing administrative as well as health measures, and they try to issue a number of regulations in order to ensure that the spread of the COVID-19 can be controlled. And also recently the government also taken steps to impose lockdown measure for Phnom Penh city, which is our capital city, and also Tak Mau city, which is the city in Kandal province, because there were a lot of cases in that area as well. The lockdown, so based on the decision on the 3rd May, the government also decided that the lockdown will be lifted from tomorrow on, which is a good sign.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, and but still, the government still give the power to the Phnom Penh capital authority to decide whether their specific area should be put under the lockdown or whether a certain restriction should be put in places. Yeah.
And so, and I think you already mentioned that the vaccination campaign started already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, and if we put that into perspective, because I heard a lot about, the vaccination campaign, and especially the fact that it's actually free for everyone in Cambodia, open to everyone as well. So everyone everyone who wants to take the vaccine can do it. So the questions that we get along with this is, okay, can an employer require its employees to be vaccinated, since all employees can actually take the vaccine from the government? So yeah, on the employer, what is the employer's rights in terms of requiring this?
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the government has issued a number of regulations, and one among those regulations is the subdegree number 37. So under that subdegree, the government has clearly mentioned that the COVID-19 vaccination is undertaken on a voluntary basis, and vaccination will only be required for a certain group of people based upon their working condition, and this will be determined by the Ministry of Health. And subsequently, after 1 month later, this April, the government issued another subdegree on the mandatory vaccination that oblige public officials in legislative, executive, and judicial branches, as well as other persons that deemed necessary by the Ministry of Health to get vaccinated. Nevertheless, until now, there is no regulation that requires employee in the private sectors to get vaccinated, although the government urges all people, especially workers in the textile, garment, and footwear sector, to get vaccinated. So to your question, I can say that in the absence of any explicit legal requirement, the employer cannot really compel or require employees to be vaccinated unless there is any mandatory requirement issued by the authority later on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. And so another question we get, and this is actually very relevant for Cambodia, considering the sophistication of the employment law there, and especially the I would say implication and powers of the workplace trade union, or the other form of collective representation. So in the event that the company has trade unions or these other types of collective representation, is the employer required to consult with them prior to implementing employee vaccinations, or whether they know that employees will be vaccinated? Do we have to consult with them?
Well, to my knowledge, under the labor law, we do not see any mandatory legal requirement in relation to asking or obtaining any consent or any requirement regarding to consultation with shop steward or employee representative or trade union before the employer start implementing any employee vaccination. So the problem will rest upon the internal work rule, existing policy, or other collective bargaining agreement that the employer has in place, or whether the employer has agreed with the trade union that any vaccination or health and safety program must be consulted with them. That said, actually, under the labor law and trade union law in Cambodia, give a certain duty to shop steward. Those duties include the fact that the shop steward need to ensure the enforcement of provision concerning occupational health and safety, and they can also propose to the employer regarding the measures that would contribute to protecting and improving health and safety of the employee. So based on this, I believe that it is a reasonable view to be formed that the vaccination program, which is related to employee health and safety, it should be done in conjunction with the consultation with the shop steward. Yeah, and for trade union, we do not really see specific duty in the trade union law regarding health and safety, but they are the employee representative as well. So if there is any trade union in place, it is also recommended that employer consult with them prior to implement any vaccination program. So this consultation, to my experience, is very helpful to ensure the industrial harmony and to avoid any unnecessary dispute that may be raised by the trade union as well as the shops to vote. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. So we will move to another topic, and this is also a question that we got a lot is, can an employer provide what we call endorsement, which could be, you know, either bonuses or wellness programs to those employees who undergo vaccination? So in other words, sorry, can we reserve specific types of benefits such as bonuses to a specific category of employees, meaning the employee who have accepted to be vaccinated?
This is interesting, Marion. So actually, there is no any restriction regarding to the provision of any inducement to the employees who will undergo vaccination. So I believe that it is possible that the employer may provide inducement as a mean for encouraging employee to be vaccinated. But you need to be careful about the subsequent regulation or policy that may state differently. So in the event the employer would like to have the employee to get the vaccination on a voluntary basis, I think they can provide the wellness program or other bonuses.
Yeah. And especially they need to be careful because there is always a risk that, you know, there can be some employees filing discrimination claims. So yeah, I mean,
you spot on, Marion.
No, but I mean, this is the first things that come to my mind, you know, when I get this question. I think it needs to be justified by objective grounds, and there need to be like specific reason for the company to especially require its employees to be vaccinated. But anyway, thank you very much. So still on the, of course, vaccination queries, can an employer terminate its employees, the employees who refuse to be vaccinated? Would that be like an admissible grounds under Cambodian law?
Oh, well, like I mentioned earlier, under the current legal framework and based on the sub-degree 37, the employee or any other vaccinations that need to be done on the employee will need to be on voluntary basis. So an employer could not really dismiss employee by basing on the fact that the employee refused to be vaccinated. So if the employer decides to terminate an employee because of that reason, it will be construed as the termination without cause. Yeah, and also another ground that you have mentioned in previous question, Marion, about the discrimination. So under the labor law, there is no, in the entire discrimination provision, there is no any ground that are relevant to state of health. But in criminal code in Cambodia, there is a provision that criminalize certain discriminatory acts in the context of employment, and it includes the refusal to hire and termination of employment based on state of health. So if the employer start to terminate employee based on the vaccination status, the employee could allege the employer based on the discrimination under the criminal code, because the vaccination status, of course, can be construed as the state of health of the employee. Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. And maybe the last one, which is also very interesting, is related to, you know, the employer's obligation on one hand to ensure, you know, the health and safety of its employees, but on the other hand, you know, to put this into balance with the employee's right and employee's freedom to take or not take the vaccine. So my question is, can an employer require employees who cannot or do not want to take the vaccine to refrain from coming to the office in order, you know, to protect the other employees, for instance? Can they do that?
I need to repeat the same answer regarding to the vaccination in Cambodia. Since the vaccination in Cambodia is on a voluntary basis for the private sector, the employer cannot really ban their employees from the workplace who cannot really or will not agree to get the vaccination. By banning employees from coming to workplace may affect their the existing term and condition of their employment contract, of course, because you have a contract that promised to provide work to the employee, and employee promised to come to work, and then you need to pay the employees. And since the COVID-19 situation is still evolving and vaccination in this stage is still a new concept and it's still developing, in any event, if the employer implement any program related to COVID-19, they should be carefully undertaken and considered. As my last word for that answer as well, we recommend that the employer should check the relevant regulation, contractual terms, the existing policy, and also keep apprised of any subsequently issue regulation concerning COVID-19 to ensure that they can mitigate the risks, especially the allegation of discrimination or forced resignation, for example. Yeah.
That seemed very sensible. Thank you. Thank you very much. So actually, we still have 4 minutes left for questions. So let me see the question we got. So the first question from our audience is it acceptable under the Cambodian law that the employer asks employees about their vaccination campaign?
Okay, this is really good question, and I think everyone wants to know as well. So in general, in Cambodia, it is acceptable for an employer to ask its employee whether they have been vaccinated against COVID-19 or not. But it needs to be with two specific conditions. One is they need to ensure that the inquiries are on the premise of ensuring workplace health and safety, and the employees are not really compelled to respond. So the employer needs to be ensure that it is in line with the current sub-degree of 37, because sub-degree 37 state that the vaccination will need to be on voluntary basis. So by asking the employee about their vaccination status, they can't really force them to give the answer. So employee has the right to decline to answer that question. Yeah.
So in other words, sorry to interrupt. So in other words, we need to get the employee's consent, right? This is what you recommend.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to talk about. The employer need to focus on two other important issue as well, which is they need to ensure that an employee's answer doesn't really result in any action that is discriminatory in nature, and that his or her data with respect to vaccination status is kept confidential. And as a recommendation, like you said, in order to mitigate any risk of breaching employees' personal rights, and as well as to ensure that the process of asking the question on to the employee regarding their vaccination status, we recommend that employer prepare clear guidance on the purpose of the question. Also, they need to prepare a proper documentation regarding the answer and secure its employee consent in providing their vaccination status.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very complete answer. So yeah, I think we have time for a last question. So let me see. Yeah, so this one is interesting. Whether the employer can administer private vaccination to its employees, meaning that whether the employer can, take the responsibility and, be in charge of, all the logistic and everything to vaccinate its employees itself.
Okay. So I would like to note on that point that to date, the vaccination campaign in Cambodia is solely administered by the government, and there is no other regulation governing mechanism for private vaccination. So under the current legal framework, the company or the employer is not really permitted to implement a private vaccination program administered or by the company through a private hospital for its employee. So in the absence of that regulation, I recommend that any private vaccination program only be implemented when the official guidelines or regulations are introduced that are addressing this issue. For the time being, the company should only facilitate employees getting vaccinated through the Ministry of Health and the COVID-19 Vaccination Committee. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Raksa. And actually that concludes our webinar for today. So thank you very much, Raksa, for participating. I think it was a very interesting and direct interactive session. So if the audience has any question regarding this webinar, feel free to contact us, so me and Raksa. You can find our contact information on our website. This session has been recorded and will be available soon on our website and social media. If you enjoy this program, I encourage you to connect you tomorrow at the same time for the Indonesian session, where our legal expert will discuss COVID-19 vaccination in Indonesia. Thank you again for participating, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion.
Thanks.